Okay, so I think we can start. Good morning, everyone. We are really happy to have you all here in this webinar as the race to deploy the 10 gigawatt of electrolysis capacity in development countries intensify, securing a social license to operate emerges as a make or break factor for a project's success. And this is why it's key that organizations like the World Bank, through the Hydrogen for Development, are joining forces with different entities around the world to clarify which are the best practices to develop this social licensing. I'm going to make a brief introduction of our next speaker, who's going to give us their opening remarks. Chandra Sekar Govindarahalu, I hope I said it right. Uh, Chandra oversees a global portfolio of analytical and advisory activities in the energy sector, as well as the bank's energy climate finance operation. SMAP is a partnership between the World Bank and more than 20 partners to support energy access and decarbonization in low and middle income countries. He has over 20 years of experience on topics including energy efficiency, renewable energy, energy storage, coal transition, and energy access across 15 countries in South Asia, East Asia, and the Middle East and North Africa. Chandra is practice manager, SMAP World Bank. Chandra, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Monica. Good morning to all the participants, panelists, and especially our H4D partners. Welcome to the launch of this report on insights on social licensing to operate, learning lessons from the renewable energy projects, and trying to apply them to clean hydrogen development for the challenges that Monica just outlined. We are really pleased to co-host this today, together with the Columbia Hydrogen Association, Green Ammonia Association, Green Hydrogen Association, H2LAC. It's a real pleasure to co-host this. We especially extend our thanks to Columbia Hydrogen Association for being such a pivotal part of this report and doing this jointly with SMAP and the World Bank. So today's discussions are obviously part of our dialogue on building a global hydrogen economy in the coming years. Coming to today's session, we will hear from experts representing diverse organizations who will share their lessons and experiences in developing clean hydrogen projects. Our focus is going to be on the crucial necessity for getting the social licensing to operate, which is in a timely manner, and obtaining these are really essential for ensuring not only the risks are managed, but also for the financial viability of these investments. So these are not peripheral risks, but they go to the fundamentals of these projects. So the report will highlight that scaling clean hydrogen faces interlinked challenges, as you might appreciate, on regulatory uncertainty, overcoming that, permitting hurdles in sensitive sites, and institutional early stakeholder engagement, which is critical to the success of developing a good project. Finding today, fostering a dialogue among the colleagues, and how we can share this broader, and how this can bring to bear this experience on other countries that are trying to develop these projects. Before joining the discussion with our esteemed panelists, I would like to remind that this is about decarbonization, but it is much more also about development in general. And hydrogen can foster development, all the while creating jobs and opportunities for a population that is growing in our countries. From SMAP, we are looking forward to working with all the partners and all the stakeholders in moving this agenda forward, especially the 10 gigawatt initiative. And we really look forward to learning these lessons and putting them in practice as we help our client countries. Let's begin this productive session, and thank you so much, and over to you, back to you, Monica.
Thank you, Chandra. And now we will continue to our main presentation. Our main presentation is going to be given by Silvia Carolina Lopez Rocha. She's energy specialist at the World Bank. Carolina is an international lawyer with over 10 years of experience reforming policies and regulations to boost investment in the energy sector. Ms. Carolina joined the World Bank in 2016 and has developed instruments to finance green hydrogen, energy efficiency, and renewable power projects. Carolina also collaborated with the OECD and the Inter-American Bank to attract private investors in the energy sector to Eastern European and Latin American and Caribbean countries. Before joining the World Bank, she was the legal officer at the Mexican-Chinese Chamber of Commerce, where she led negotiations between the Mexican government and transnational enterprises to advance trade and investment. And she also developed public-private partnerships projects for infrastructure. Carolina, the floor is yours.
Thank you very much, Monica, for the introduction, and thank you very much for the H4D partners that made this document possible. I would like to mention that this is a joint effort that we have been creating, drafting, and producing with the support of Hidrógeno Colombia, Ammonia Energy Association, the Netherlands Enterprise Agency, Green Hydrogen Organization, and the Agencia Estatal de Energías Renovables de Nuevo León, all of which are H4D partners and have been very supportive of the work on social license to operate. The presentation that we have prepared for today will be divided in three parts. So first of all, we will have some concepts. That way we are all aligned and we all have the same terminology for this discussion. The second part, we will be discussing actionable recommendations, because what we want for the audience to have here is actions that they can implement in their green hydrogen projects. And the third part would be some cases of projects that were challenged to obtain social license to operate, found difficulties, but they also found the solutions and eventually moved away to operation. So here you can see how the report is looking, and we have also included a QR code so that all the audience can download it. We will have it also at the end, so no worries. And what we want to discuss today in this presentation is what are the key insights for social license to operate in renewable energy projects. We know that clean or green hydrogen projects are per se very capex oriented, but 2/3 of those that capex is also renewable energy. So there is no green hydrogen without renewables, and that is why drawing the lessons from hydropower and wind projects is relevant, because these green hydrogen or derivatives projects eventually are just enlarged renewables projects. And it is also very important for us to share this document because, as both Chandra and Monica mentioned, at the World Bank, we are supporting the 10 gigawatt Lighthouse Initiative. This is something that we are working with 15 more development financial institutions. And what we aim is to have 10 gigawatt of electrolysis capacity deployed by 2030. And in order to do that, it is an element essential to recognize that we will need a lot of infrastructure development. Upstream, midstream, and downstream infrastructure will be necessary, and for that infrastructure to take place, social license, it is essential. So we would like to share with you one concept of what is social license to operate. This is something that we didn't create, but it's a consensus that we have. So the IFC, colleagues from the Green Hydrogen Organization, Hydrogen Colombia, we all agree on that social license to operate can be defined as an ongoing acceptance, and also as an approval of a project by its stakeholders, but it should also include local communities, civil societies, and governmental bodies. And here it is very relevant to say that ongoing acceptance means that it's throughout the whole process of the project, not only in the development, or not at the moment where the plant will start operating, but throughout the whole process. And we also understand that social license is an unofficial way to engage the local communities, but three aspects need to be very in the minds of whoever is developing this project and is obtaining the SLOs, which is, first of all, the company and the developers need to have a responsible corporate behavior. And what does this mean? Well, it means that they need to demonstrate with actions and not only words that they are engaged with the communities where they will be operating. Second, they need to be transparent, and they also have to have a meaningful engagement with the local community. So as I was mentioning before, it's not when the plant is built that they come and engage with the community, but before. And third, we need to see tangible local benefits. And on that, Chandra was mentioning before that hydrogen and its derivatives have the capacity to bring development, to generate jobs. And we see that these local benefits go even beyond that. We are seeing projects that can provide the excess of water or renewable electricity to the local communities. But for those that are going not only for hydrogen, but for example, on ammonia, also the green ammonia could be available, for example, for the use of fertilizers, and that could also enhance the local green farming of the countries. So in the social license to operate, there are several levels that are ascending. So first of all, these levels, the aim is that all projects could have co-ownership. That would be the best and the ideal for the projects that are being developing in Latin America, in Asia, in Africa. So the lowest is just acceptance, which is when the community is only neutral. Then it goes approval, which is when the activity and this project is supported by the local community. And that can be done with specific actions. For example, having a community advisory body that is within the local community is relevant. Having a grievance mechanism. So in case something is not going well, they have a place and a space where they can put claim, and that will be solved, and also participatory programs. And the best one, which is the one that we really aim to have, is co-ownership. That is when the community is really participating in operation and also in the decision-making of the projects. And I want to share with all the attendees today that today I am in Namibia. And it was great to see that this is not something that we're just discussing in a webinar, but it's actually happening. So we were discussing with Duares, which is a project that will produce hydrogen, and then will also produce ammonia for fertilizers. And they shared with us that 10% of the shares of the project are owned by the local community. So I wanted to share that with you because that demonstrates an actionable project and a way in which these projects can move forward. And in order to do that, we mentioned, this is the second part of the presentation, that we would have an actionable checklist. So here you can find some of the actions that we have mapped for you. And the first one is that we are recommending to have a stakeholder mapping and analysis. So we see, for example, that many of these projects will have to be connected to the grid and that transmissions line would have to be built. So in this stakeholder mapping and analysis, if the project developer already identifies that there should be an easement for the transmission line to pass, they need to engage all these stakeholders that will be impacted by the activities. Also, we have the building local capacity. As again, Chandra and Monica were mentioning, it's not only about the jobs creation, but also the development. So skilling the local community, reskilling, having, for example, also revenue sharing mechanisms can support that. The transparent communication and also the environmental and social impact assessments. What they are doing when they are being done with the support of the government, that's easier. We see, for example, in Latin America or in Africa, that many of these projects will have to collect the data. There is no pre-existing data on the environmental aspects. So having to collect that data and having the government participating would be a good and adequate practice to also secure the SLO. And again, this should be throughout this participation throughout the full life cycle of the project. So these are the actions that we wanted to discuss with you. And now I'm moving to the third part of the presentation, which is to discuss real-life projects that had challenges to obtain social license to operate, and then the specific actions that were taken so that they could unlock and obtain that social license. So the first case that we will discuss is the case of Itaipu Hydroelectric Dam. This is a dam that is in the border of Brazil and Paraguay. It has 14,000 megawatt of installed capacity, so it's the largest in Latin America. And there were three challenges that they were facing. First, displaced communities. Of course, because of the construction of these, certain communities that were living there would have to be displaced to a different territory. Then the flooding would generate impacts in the biodiversity. And the third is the sensitiveness also between Brazil and Paraguay. The way in which this was overcome, these challenges, was, first of all, there was local infrastructure investment. So once the communities were moved and relocated, the companies were the company and the government were contributing to have infrastructure where they were relocated. Then for the flooding impacts on biodiversity, there were specific programs for environmental restoration that were able to put all these flora and fauna in different places so it wouldn't be damaged without any restoration efforts. And the third mechanism was also the diplomacy and cooperation between the two governments, between Brazil and Paraguay. And in the same Latin American context, we are seeing that there are some projects that will be using hydropower also in Latin America, but also in sub-Saharan Africa. So this is a good example of how they can cooperate even between different countries. The next case that we will be discussing is the one of Kipeto Wind Project in Kenya. So this is a 100 megawatt onshore wind with 60 turbines. The challenge here was that the land was occupied by the natural indigenous community, which is the Maasai people, and they really had a mistrust on the benefit sharing and how would that impact on their lives. So the way in which it was being solved is that there was a direct land lease with the community. Also, it was created a trust fund that was managed by the local community, and 5% of the net profits in the community were given to them. And in addition, the company was able to work with the government to have, for example, school refurbishments and clean water available to the community. So these tangible local benefits were what enabled the company to obtain the social license to operate. And the third example that we have is the Kaligandaki hydroelectric power plant in Nepal. So this is a 140 megawatt plant. And the challenge that they were having is the sensitiveness also in the land. For the local community, they had a lot of fisheries and certain sites that they were using in their sacred ceremonies. And the way that they were able to solve the challenge is through early consultation. And for them, it was not only the compensation. So we also need to realize that sometimes it's not even only the money that is the critical part, but that goes beyond that. So for them, transparency was a critical aspect that was relevant. And based on that, they were also, for example, able to implement other activities such as ecotourism and generate other income for the local community. This is the last slide, and I just would like to end the presentation saying three things. First of all, it is true that obtaining a social license to operate is not easy, but we know that if it is since the early beginning, the engagement, it will be more feasible to have it. Second, a lot of transparency and communication has to be done, because we also need to be realistic with the communities. It is true that these projects take years to develop and operationalize. So even if a revenue sharing mechanism is created, it doesn't mean that since day one it will have funding for the community. It will take maybe 5-6 years in order for the project to start having revenues and to be able to provide that funding to the community. So transparency is also critical. And the third one is also that this has to be throughout the integration of the local partners. So that's why H4D is very relevant for us, because the members that we have are based in the countries where these projects are taking place. And that's why working with all the H4D members and the local governments is critical for the World Bank to support the hydrogen industry. So thank you very much, Monica, and back to you.
Thank you, Carolina. Thank you very much for the presentation. And now moving on with the agenda, we're gonna go to the discussion panel that I am really happy to moderate, because as Carolina said, without green energy, there is no green hydrogen, but without the people and the communities, there is not green energy. It is, if we have the land, but we cannot use it, the probability of really decarbonizing our energy matrix globally gets lower and lower every time. So this is a key topic that we need to consult. It's really nice to see that the Hydrogen for Development Initiative has looked and made a deep down into different examples around the countries, because all of the countries have different scenarios, and we have to be really creative to create the trust with the communities to include them in the earliest stages of the projects. For the ones that don't know me, I'm Monica Gasca. I used to be the president of the Colombian Hydrogen Association. Back in the days, I used to work for the Ministry of Energy of Colombia, and I was in charge of developing the hydrogen roadmap. And right now, I'm helping private companies developing projects in Colombia and Latin America. So this is a key topic which I'm going to be discussing with 4 panelists. I am just going to briefly say who they are and give them a minute to introduce themselves so I don't create a monologue here. I'm going to start with Andrea Guatirrojo, Stakeholder Relationship Manager of the Ammonia Energy Association.
Excellent. Thank you, Monica. It's great to be here. I'm Andrea Guatirrojo. I'm the Stakeholder Relations Manager inside of the Ammonia Energy Association. I coordinate partnerships with international organizations, also coordinate the work on ammonia safety and ammonia public perception. So specifically, I've been working with ammonia since 2016, which is my background on environmental engineering, and then a PhD specifically on ammonia perception with both psychology and engineering, which is why this report and this webinar being here today means a lot to me, and it's a great milestone to be having this conversation. So thank you for this opportunity.
Amazing. Our next panelist, Juan David Giraldo, Technical Advisor of the Asociación Hidrógeno Colombia.
Thank you very much, Moni, for the presentation, and thank you to the World Bank and all the other partner organizations that were involved in the development of this report. Back 2 years ago, when we were drafting this report, we were thinking which would be the best topic to talk about in this social licensing and community engagement part for the hydrogen projects. And I think we have come up with a very great report at the end. Here in the association, we are very happy to have collaborated with all those stakeholders, and currently in the association, we represent more than 30 companies along all the value chain, international and national companies in Colombia. And I'm in charge right now on the development of technical and regulatory strategies to keep advancing on the hydrogen ecosystem. So very happy to be here, and thank you very much for the people that joined us also.
Thank you, Juan. Now, Simran Sia, Program Officer of Green Hydrogen Organization.
Thank you, Monica, and hello, everyone. I'm Simran. I work as a program officer with the Green Hydrogen Organization. We also call it GH2. Been around for more than 3 years, and I come with a background in economics. At GH2, we work towards scaling renewables-based hydrogen, green hydrogen in hard-to-abate sectors as fertilizers, shipping, and steel. I oversee our Cairo Center of Excellence, something we work as a network called the Green Fertilizer Development Network, which is now a network of 100 plus organizations, and also coordinate some other initiatives like the Planning for Climate Coalition. These are some of the initiatives that through which I've been very glad to have contributed to this report in my capacity as the co-chair for this work stream on socioeconomics and sustainability. At GH2, we see social license as something which is quite decisive. We can say without it, it could be a stranded asset. And very happy to see that the report is showing what happens when you say trust is neglected, delays, cancellations, lots and lots of resistance. And we feel that this is something that our sector at this point in 2025 cannot really afford right now. So yeah, that being said, very happy to join the panel today and look forward to the discussions. Thanks, Moni.
Thank you, Simran. And now Constanza Meneses, Program Coordinator of H2LAC.
Hi, Monica. Thank you for the introduction. Yes, thank you for introducing me. My name is Constanza Meneses. I'm the program coordinator for H2LAC, which is a project that brings together over 40 institutions working on green hydrogen and derivatives in Latin America and the Caribbean. H2LAC is actually a joint initiative of the Euroclima program, which is co-financed by the European Union and the federal government of Germany through the Federal Ministry of Economic Cooperation and Development, together with GIZ, with the World Bank, and with ECLAC. And what we try to do is to foster cooperation, try to help with knowledge sharing, and actually get all these institutions to dialogue and to try to build this new industry that is not only competitive globally, but actually also sustainable and inclusive locally. So this comes in really well with what we try to do on our day-to-day basis. So very happy to be here and looking forward to the panel.
Thank you, Constanza. Well, with this brief introduction of our panelists, we're going to start with the first question that is really a close question to me now that I'm developing projects in a private company. So why is this type of report important to consider in the discussions? What challenges remain unaddressed? So let's start by Juan David so we can have like a Colombian briefing of why this is important.
Thank you, Moni, for the question. And for us, this kind of reports and analysis is very important. Is key for not just for us as an association, but mainly for our companies that are developing projects in regions like La Guajira, which is a region that we will talk about later. And this is a very key. This is a key action for us to develop also actions, to give recommendations from the projects, and also to develop focused strategies that we can develop from the association with other stakeholders like the governments, like the local communities. And I think this is the main point of these reports and the work that we have done in these past years. When we started to draft this report, as I said, like 2 years ago, we were in Colombia in a point where more than 80% of the projects in La Guajira were delayed because of the social licensing. Because of social licensing issues. So at the end, this is something that is key for the projects. It's not just a box that must be checked, but it is in the basis of any of the projects that will be developed to get that community engagement, to give the communities fair compensation on what's being taken from their territory. And basically, I think that some of the challenges that maybe remain also unaddressed and that won't be addressed maybe by any report, because at the end, a report can take into account some of the topics on social licensing, but you won't have ever a handbook of how to get a social license, like, I don't know, like mathematics. It's something that you can do, that you have to develop for each community. So I think that everything about the community opposition risk, the benefit sharing, and also getting that long-term sustainability is something that is very particular of each community, and is something that we see that we have to keep working on, and each project has to take into account the context of the community, of the territory, on where they are developing the project, to keep or to get that social licensing to operate that we were talking about in the report.
Thank you, Juan David. And I agree with you that I see hydrogen as a new opportunity for lots of things. It's a new opportunity for all the renewable energy that we have. It's a new opportunity for decarbonization, but it is also a new opportunity to prove that we can work with the communities from the beginning of the projects, and that the real engagement from stage zero is what's going to get us to have successful projects in the world and in the region. So I'm going to continue with Constanza to get LATAM, and then we're going to jump to the global panelists.
Great. Thank you, Monica. I actually love what you just said, because it makes a lot of sense to us to frame this as an opportunity. This is a new industry, but the challenges are not necessarily new, right? We have past experiences from the extractives industry, and we have past experiences that are quite recent with the renewable energy industry. And as such, there are lots of things that we can learn from them and that we can start applying from the very beginning. As we said, this is a very resource strong industry, and as such, there's lots of challenges that we'll have to overcome. So we can draw on these lessons and extrapolate all of this to this new industry. Why is this report important? I think, first of all, because it gets us talking about this, and I think that's the very, very beginning of all of this. And with the examples, we also get a lot of structured framework on how we can actually integrate this social license into projects from the very beginning, right? We're seeing that projects have had hiccups, right, when it comes to social acceptance. And we're learning that if we get them involved from, as Monica said, from stage zero, things can be different. So it reinforces at the end that, social acceptance, it's not just a side issue, but it's actually a precondition for this to actually pan out and work. And that's what we're all hoping for, to make this industry as sustainable as possible and as inclusive as possible. We still do have some challenges. I'm going to talk a little bit about implementation gaps. We have some guidelines, but it's not all fixed. And we need to integrate this into permits, into tenders, into contracts, and that's still something that remains to be addressed. We also have territorial inequalities, and I think that that's a really big issue. I'm based in Chile, for example, and we have a very long country with very different territories. And we see the two primary poles, Antofagasta, for example, and it has a lot of mining industry. So, people are already coming with apprehensions from this industry. And then we have the south in the Patagonia, where, of course, you have massive landscapes that are untouched and that will now potentially have thousands of, aerogenerators. So this is an issue that we still need to address. And as Juan David said, this is going to be massive in the sense that this is completely new for some of these territories. And we need to address that as well. And then capacity gaps, right? So local governments are also key here, and we'll have to have a bigger coordination with them as well. So I feel like this is a good roadmap. It'll give us lots of good cases to take learnings from, but it's just the very beginning.
Thank you, Constanza. Yeah, we're all learning about hydrogen. And if this is sometimes a little bit of a question mark for us that are in the industry, imagine for the community seeing this for the first time. So this is key. Andrea, how do you guys see this report? Why is it important for the Ammonia Energy Association?
Thanks, Moni. Well, I think it was perfectly put by Juan and Connie on the importance of this report. I think that exactly like Connie said, this report puts on the table the topic of social acceptance and the importance of involving the community at an early stage. And for us, it's important because, as I briefly said, I started working with this topic 9 years ago, approximately, and people were asking me, like, why are you looking into that? Like, why would you do a PhD on, like, community acceptance, on public perception? And I had all the time these type of questions. And I was there trying to convince them, like, yeah, no, community matters. It's important. Really, projects need to be built around and with them. And I think that this kind of reports actually puts that perfectly. What is going on? What should be done? What do we need to do in these regions for this to happen as it should? Right? And then we see more and more projects that have been canceled or relocated or that take years to be developed just because the community was not included from the beginning, like you, Moni, that you were saying that. Like, as simple as it would have been to start conversations in parallel from the construction and from the planning and start involving them, they decided to just leave the community till the end. So I think that this kind of reports is a great example of how not to do that. Start working with the community, start considering what they think, to listen to them, and not only implying that, yeah, it's good for the environment, so we can do whatever we want. And it's not how it works. And that's exactly what we are seeing in this report. So that's why for the AEA it's important to have this kind of reports where you have in writing case studies giving you examples of what is going on and what should be happening when you develop a project on hydrogen or on ammonia low carbon projects.
Thank you, Andrea. And yes, this is good for the environment, but at the end, the question is it good for the communities? And Simran, can you please tell us a little bit about your approach from GH2?
Thanks again, Moni, and thanks everyone. I think going at the end, I reiterate what everyone has said. It's quite important because we're kind of making social license visible in the hydrogen debate. Like for me personally, 10 hours a day, 8-10 hours a day, discussions focus on megawatts and cost of capital curves and the derivatives. This report is reminding us that projects succeed or fail on trust, and that comes from the community. As Carol pointed out in the presentation, it draws from lessons that we're learning from the larger renewable sector, where neglecting communities has led to a lot of delays and resistance. And in particular now for hydrogen, green hydrogen, which requires land and large water resources, especially you see like global south emerging markets, the stakes are even higher. There are several challenges which are kind of unaddressed. Like benefit sharing component that we have in the report. In some parts, it still remains a little vague. Like companies speak of jobs and opportunities, but rarely define what the community will end up counting on at the end. Permitting reforms. This is also where at GH2 we've done a lot of work, but often like the focus is largely on speed, like not on community participation. Okay, cutting down on permitting timeframes, but at cost of what? So faster permitting risk also creates a lot of backlash, which comes in later. So there, I feel like disclosure with the community is another gap. And when we just talk about green hydrogen projects, I mean, at GH2, we feel like not a lot of these projects have data, say, on land, water, community impact. So that's definitely a gap. Policymakers, even people who want to invest, they don't know how to assess the social risk. It's kind of vague, not so tangible at the moment. So the task, I think, moving forward as well is how you can hardwire these requirements into frameworks and permitting statements as a precondition for these big investments, and not something that you just voluntarily add on. Then you move towards a real bankable reality. Yeah, and I think we've already seen the gaps in places with green hydrogen projects where these communities are not on board. In Tunisia, there was a green hydrogen project which faced a strong local opposition where there was overwater usage in that region, which already has a lot of stress, water stress, like Mauritania, Tunisia, all these countries. So it's a reminder that, even if the project is branded as green, it still, can get stalled if communities see that their concerns are not addressed. We have similar ones in LATAM and even in Australia, like the Western Australian Green Energy Hub. A lot of discussions about land rights and, where you have these fragile indigenous ecosystems. So that's a reminder that even, large flagship projects can stall when you don't have community on board. Maybe I can just add towards the end of it, we can already see it coming into play, like the whole picture, just considering the Morocco's offer, green hydrogen offer that the government has come up with, which the main component is land allocation into a structured governance framework with 5 to 6 companies. But what we feel like the only success is if the participation from those communities is real and not just symbolic on paper, because you focus heavily on hectares of land where community is living and it's all at industrial scale, but you kind of the offer risk overlooking the community dimension. So it just doesn't depend on the state allocating this land, but also whether the local people agree or not and see their tangible efforts, as I mentioned. And if that's weak or, say, largely absent, it will definitely trigger resistance. Maybe not now, but in the later term, and especially, as I mentioned, in regions where you have land and water heavily contested with the community. So yeah, maybe I'll just stop there.
Thank you, Simran. And yeah, it is not only that this report is important, but this report is key because it's the roadmap to the first step that we need to take for the projects. And at the end, what we need to achieve is an engagement, but an ongoing and real engagement with the communities. So now, because we have a little bit of more time, we're going to jump to one question to every panelist. So we're going to start with Andrea. As green ammonia projects scale up in the developing countries, how is the association engaging with developers to ensure community concerns like water use and land access are integrated into early planning these topics to avoid future disruptions?
I think that's a great question. In an ideal scenario, I would say yes, they are always considered. But to be honest, that is not the case. Most of the times, we see that communities are seen as an impediment for developing a project instead of as a way to collaborate to create these projects. So in the AEA, our mission is to promote the responsible use of ammonia in a sustainable economy. And when I say responsible, I also mean not only technical or financial, or it's also with the society, being responsible with the community we're building. And that's part of our mission. And the way that we do it inside of the AEA is act as a knowledge hub, but also creating these collaborations and connections in order so that our members are able to know who to reach out and when, in what phase, because the AEA is a global association. So of course, each project is going to have their own characteristics, their own timeline. It's not the same Latin America than Colombia, than Japan or Australia. Each is going to have their own, and as we saw in the report, own characteristics. So creating these connections for us as the AEA is very important. And also the part of advocacy, putting, like in this report, the topic outside, being in conferences, explaining the importance of these activities. And at the moment, the AEA, we are working with ISPT here in the Netherlands. So I'm based in Rotterdam. And we are working with the ISPT on a public perception project for clean ammonia, which is with other 10 companies. And also, for example, supporting projects like Ver2X, which is on decentralized ammonia production. And then how also, like Carolina was saying, supporting the communities with clean fertilizers, but also energy independence, and how that can provide a whole ecosystem and benefit for the community. So different strategies that the AEA does to support this topic, different ways, but as you, Moni, said, is the beginning. And we are always trying to see what else we need to do to support the topic of public acceptance.
Amazing. Thank you, Andrea. And as you say, every project is a world, but also every community is a new world. Because sometimes we think communities are alike in different parts of the country, and they're not. The idiosyncrasy of different communities gives a different type of, not challenges, but color to the projects in different regions. So now Juan David, which is focused here in Colombia, and we have Guajira with all of these indigenous communities. The report emphasizes the distinction between community, market, and social political acceptance. Where do you see the biggest gaps in Colombia today, and how is the association helping to close them? Especially talk to us a little bit about La Guajira, where we have this huge opportunity to develop these projects.
Thank you, Moni. This is a very, very important question and very broad, and for a very broad answer, basically. Well, I think that the market and socio-political acceptance at the end is something that we have been working on from the associations, and I think it's something that is not that challenging than community acceptance at the end. And I will tell you why, because at the end, and I'm talking about specifically La Guajira, and Andrea was talking about, for example, that it's not the same Latin America than India and other regions in the world. Well, in Colombia and as well as in Chile, at the end, La Guajira is not the same as, for example, Valle del Cauca, which is in the Pacific coast. Is not the same. We have, like, the main beauty of Colombia, which is diversity, is also its main challenges. Its main challenge sometimes, and when talking about renewable energy projects, in this case, hydrogen projects, is something very important. And at the end, it's because, for example, in La Guajira, you have a historical background when you have unfulfilled as coal industries, also that led to some acts of corruption in the local governments and in the local context, that summed with the government neglect to like that great gap that has been built along the years, from that government neglect to get to those communities, to those places, to fulfill the gaps on basic necessities, has led to the mistrust of communities, basically. So today, communities have a very hard historical background of corruption, of unfulfilled promises, and also in sometimes of violence in their territories. So at the end, when someone comes with a project that in theory will help them, well, they will tell you, well, someone came 30 years ago and with other project, and they told me the same thing. So at the end, we trust that this is the main challenge, because it has to build trust from from that historical background, and start building some strategies to keep gaining that trust from the communities that will be impacted from the renewable energy projects, or in this case, hydrogen projects. And this is also important, not only understanding the historical background, but also all the cultural, the culture, their language. We have, for example, in La Guajira, well, in Colombia, you may think that we talk, everyone talk in Spanish, but at the end in La Guajira we have also people that talks in their indigenous language, like I forgot the Rajonaik, yeah. Thank you, Moni. And at the end is you have these languages that don't have complex terms like energy transition or electrolyzer or hydrogen, because at the end they have a very different history. So at the end we see that there is another challenge to get those concepts understood by the local communities, and it's not just understood. They have to build their own concept about what is energy transition, what is the decarbonization, what is hydrogen, not exactly with the same words, but to understand what means for them, what means, if it means development, if it means, for example, in a hydrogen project, access to water, access to electricity, because at the end this is what they live in the everyday life. And basically for that, from the association, we have developed some strategies that go basically focused on that knowledge dissemination, on the building of concepts, understanding that the projects being developed in these areas are still in a very early stage, and we are on time to develop the things in a correct way. So at the end, for example, we are working with the National Navy, with the Colombian Navy, in a radio broadcast. Every 2 months, we have a radio broadcast where we talk about hydrogen, its concept, what it means, for example, hydrogen for a community, how it can be used, for example, in fertilizers. How can a hydrogen project give also access to other services? So at the end, with this radio broadcast, we make it here in Bogota, but at the end, it reaches the most remote communities in the country, from La Guajira to Tumaco in the south. So at the end, we are trying to step over this power of the radio to give knowledge to those communities. And we have also, and this is something that we did together also, Moni, here in the association, was the participating in a program supported by the international cooperation that also supported young indigenous leaders to develop projects that could help their communities, and those projects to understand how could be also integrated in the concept of those big projects of hydrogen, renewable energy. So at the end, understanding the basic necessity of the community, which, for example, in La Guajira sometimes is just having refrigeration for the fishing of the people, and just from those necessities, start building also how the communities can be engaged in the project lifetime, basically.
Good. Thank you, Juan David. Those are good strategies because right now we think that information is for everyone, but there are some places in the world which getting the information and getting technical information is really hard. I always say that the challenge for us, the technical people, is to make our grandmothers understand what we're doing with hydrogen, ammonia, and all of these new clean fuels. And talking about strategies, Simran, I want to ask you, what are the mechanisms that you at GH2 have to track community engagement and benefit across the certified projects?
Thanks again, Moni. Definitely agree on the grandmother point, by the way. So let me start again with the message that I started my intro with. Like, a project without social license is a stranded asset, and we see this as definitely non-negotiable. This is why our green hydrogen standard makes social license a requirement in the certification process. So it is the benchmark for what we count as truly green to start with. We go beyond emissions accounting and renewable sourcing. So basically, every certified project must demonstrate community engagement, benefit sharing, and a transparent reporting mechanism. Without this, the certification is basically not possible. And these are not extras or optional in the standard. They are the minimum standards that are needed to also access global markets. And we in our standard have extensively also referenced World Bank's environmental and social framework, IFC's performance standards on environment and social sustainability. And in fact, I also have my colleague Sam Bartlett on call, who's the main person behind the standard. So all of that being said, the point often gets lost when people in our industry say that colors don't matter. At GH2, everyone knows that we disagree. We published a paper as well recently called Why Hydrogen Colors Matter. And the argument there is very simple. The different production pathways, they carry different sustainability challenges, different opportunities at the same time. Gray and blue, I mean, they already rely on fossil extraction, serious risk. But even green hydrogen, it needs to be assessed for water use and supply chains, in particular for electrolyzers. So basically, sustainability here, it's going beyond emissions. It's coming together with another spectrum altogether, asking us to ignore issues of, not asking us to ignore issues of fundamental importance. And the same principle applies here, the social license. Developers everywhere are insisting on a level playing field on emission measurement, and they miss the real test. I would say the real test is whether projects have the trust of communities. And this is important, not just short term, but also long term. If they do not, they will not go ahead. The project will not go ahead. It should be as simple as that. Apart from the standard itself, through our own work at GH2, we've seen the same. At COP28, 2 years ago, we published something called the Joint Agreement on Responsible Deployment of Renewables-Based Hydrogen. As I mentioned earlier, we also have a network called the GH2 Green Fertilizer Development Network. So now moving beyond, coming from renewables to hydrogen to now these derivatives and products. And the network is active in Egypt, Morocco, beyond, like mostly global south. Where we see that projects are only bankable when communities see the real benefits. Again, jobs, land and water, safeguards, transparent agreement. I feel like without these, even finance is not flowing and projects ultimately will not progress. I did say a few examples earlier, but just on the green fertilizer one in Paraguay, the company Atom, they have a project in, it's called the Fialeta Green Fertilizer Project, which is definitely a good example of how social license is being built in the design from the very beginning. The whole project is backed by Green Climate Fund, other international partners, but the project here is applying IFC performance standards where they are doing stakeholder consultations already, be it community health, safety plans, even grievances mechanisms are already put in the picture. So these system that have been deployed, they're basically ensuring local concerns are addressed, and they're also doing external site visits, community meetings as part of the monitoring process. So all in all, showing how even fertilizer projects can gain legitimacy through early structured engagement, rather than just treating, like community as an afterthought. Okay, we're going to think about it later. And just one last point, same is true for permitting. As I mentioned, we have applying for Climate Coalition. We work with governments to cut permitting times in half while keeping the community fully engaged. So basically saying speed doesn't come at the cost of consent. So if the dialogue is not embedded from the start, opposition will come sooner or later. Resistance will ultimately stall the projects. Developers and financiers will understand this now, hopefully. I mean, social license is not really slowing down the delivery. It's the only way that we see. All in all, this is all that we're doing. But just to add another point, we must also remember that these projects are not going to move without offtake, and offtake will also happen. It will not happen without the credibility and sustainability. I mean, these customers who are going to eventually buy in 2025, not just clean molecules and everything. That's not just the only demand. They want proof that human rights are respected across the value chain. So communities, customers, they're connected. So without both, there's absolutely no market at the end of the day. So yeah, at GH2, we're trying to make the expectation of enforcing all of this through the initiatives, in particular the green hydrogen standard, how it works through networks, be it fertilizer, shipping, even steel. So it's definitely something that we believe is not a thing nice to have, but a key to finance, to offtake, and to ultimately delivery. Yeah. Thanks.
Thank you, Simran. And it's a must. But also two things that I want to highlight is we talk about sustainability and we usually forget that sustainability is three things: economics, environmental, and community, social sustainability. And those are the three sustainabilities that we need to have for a project. And it's key that we continue developing these schemes regionally. So I want to jump to Constanza to talk about the regional cooperation. What is the part that regional cooperation has in creating trust or in filling these gaps that we have on developing the projects?
Thanks, Monica. So first, I think a little bit of context. Again, I'm going to repeat myself a bit, but here in LAC, communities still have a very vivid memory of the extractive models that usually promised a lot of development and didn't deliver as much as they said they would. So what companies tend to do is to rely on ESG models, right? So they say, we'll build roads and we'll build a school. And it turns out that the roads were only used by the project. And it turns out that they didn't really need a school. Or it turns out that for example, the solar panel farm is not even giving them access to electricity to the town that's just a couple of miles away. So that vivid memory is something that we need to address, and that we need to address from the very beginning, because as we've said throughout this whole webinar, this is an opportunity to do things right from the very beginning. So this is what we're trying to do. And what can regional cooperation do? So let's remember also that this is not just about project stalling. This can actually bring down projects, and it has. And I'm not even talking about green hydrogen at this point. I'm talking about way back, we've had hydroelectric projects that have come down in spite of a lot of moving forward, but not a lot of community engagement. So this is still a critical issue. So what I believe that regional cooperation can do is, first of all, create a platform for knowledge sharing so that communities and countries don't have to go out it by themselves from scratch. And that's something that we try to do at H2LAC and that we take very seriously, is that we actually have a network. And I've said this before, but we have over 40 institutions, and these institutions are energy ministries. So we have the public part. These institutions are hydrogen associations like Hidrogeno Colombia, and we have then the industry there. We have universities, so we have the academy as well, very important for innovation and to actually move this forward locally too. And we have chambers of commerce. So what we can do here is that everyone can talk about how they've progressed, and we can have lessons learned. We can have shared knowledge. We can move forward jointly instead of everyone isolated. So I think that's one of the basics. But we can also help align on minimum safeguards and on participation, on water use, on land access, and of course on benefit sharing. And this helps us build more credibility. And that, I think that's something that the hydrogen sector really has to work through, these shared commitments and not just fragmented approaches. This is also a big thing here in Chile, where we're seeing lots of projects that are announced. We have, I think, almost 90 projects at this point that are announced just in Chile. And as such, communities are wondering, well, what happens if all of them get approved, right? Like, how will that affect our resources? And not just, land resources, but like hospital resources, schools. What will that mean for our cities? So it's not just, land use as itself, which is also an issue, water use in Chile. We will have to build desalination plants for water use. That's already a given, but also, access to for the people in the community, because this will stress all of our resources if it moves forward. So we need to address all of these concerns from the very beginning. Can do so it can bring on resources and financing, and I think very importantly, methodologies that we're not necessarily aware of. So as cooperationists, what we can bring in is the knowledge that others have and put it to work wherever we are and learn on the way, because I feel like that's what we can mostly do. Just hear each other out, extrapolate some things, and try to apply them where we are. So in a way, it also kind of helps balance asymmetries. So the key message at the end is just that regional international cooperation can actually transform the social license into an advantage. If Latin America actually takes this on from the very beginning, we can build more models and we can do this right. And hopefully it'll be a good thing instead of a challenge to tackle.
Thank you, Constanza. And yes, I think international cooperation is key to help us see what are the good practices around the world, which is kind of the goal of this report. What is everyone doing and how we can, I always say, colombianizarlo. Okay, how can we bring it to our countries and, make it work? But also we learn to prioritize in our projects in the energy transition. We are prioritizing communities. We are not coming to the communities with a paper that says, this is my project, this is the area, this is what we're going to produce. No, we're coming to the communities to say, we want to build a project and we want to do it with you. And this is not only good for the environment, but it's good for all of us as a society. So thank you very much for all of your answers. I have a final question before we jump to the Q&A section. So I'm going to give you 1 minute each to answer. The question is, what do you think are the next steps or expectations for the implementation of this report and the guidelines? How do we stop this from being just another PDF report that is beautiful and wonderful and has amazing ideas? How do we get it to work? What are these little steps? I know we don't have like a final solution, but we need step by step to get to a result. So let me start with Andrea.
Thank you, Moni. Yes, absolutely. So I think, like as Simran was saying, more certification schemes, more financing mechanism, more organizations are starting to put community acceptance as an item that they must comply with in order to get the support to develop these projects. So that is something that we are seeing, that's next steps for ammonia hydrogen projects, that community acceptance is going to be a requirement. It's not only going to be an option if you involve them or not. You need to. And then I think that all our conversations so far perfectly exemplifies the complexity of this topic, right? It's not if the community likes or not deploy the project, but it goes beyond. This report shows specifics and how each community is also Juan and Connie were saying has their specific concerns and wishes. So I would say, learn to listen to this community. Not a case of, oh, I already know what they want, and then develop these projects without having an active listening and openness, because that's the first thing that then gets the first mistake, right? Then you don't get trust, and we see in the report and all the studies that trust is the key item to get or not the support. We saw it ourselves also in a study between Mexico and the UK, and a lot of people, they thought the community were going to be afraid of a smell, when in reality they were in Mexico more scared about water use, and in the UK about emissions. So different items that one. And just to finish, I think we all know that maybe the industry is not going as fast as we would like when it comes to hydrogen and renewable energy. And I would like to invite everyone to actually take that as an advantage to start working with that community, not wait until then you already have your offtake and everything. But okay, if it's going slower, then starting being involved with the community already, trying to understand what they want, learn about the topic, read the report, of course, and start taking into account this kind of conversations that must be happening between everyone involved in the project.
Thank you, Andrea. Juan?
Yeah, thank you, Moni. Yes, well, I like that simple but very profound phrase of Andrea. Learn to listen. We have to learn to listen the communities, because at the end, this is something that companies cannot solve solely. At the end, this is something that we have to work together. The best practices are not just for the companies, but also for us, to help them, also to get also strategies for the governments to cover those gaps sometimes in basic necessities of these communities in these regions. And I will go back to those three main conclusions that gave the report, and is the importance of those local partnerships, how we get to the communities, to the regions, and we get the strategic alliances with communities, with also organizations, with local governments, to understand the basis of the or the state of art of the necessities, and also understand that or making that map of stakeholders and information to get also correct information for the development of those projects, adapting to local context, which is basically something that we have been talking about the last 50 minutes, and is the key to understand and develop these projects. And it's in the basis. Basically, what gives us the project is that the community engagement is the step zero, as Monica said at the beginning, and this based on transparency and inclusiveness. Transparency in the agreements, transparency in the managing of revenues at the end, for example, when the project is in operation, but also transparency from the beginning, from the very beginning, when we are building the concept, when we are developing the first phases of the projects. And basically this is like the main point for us, and that also is linked to that building of capacities in those territories. So two actions for me is keep supporting all the mapping and analysis of information in these territories. And second, building capacities. These are the two main actions for me.
Thank you, Juan David. And now Simran and then Constanza.
Thanks, Moni. Maybe I'll just pick from where Juan ended on capacity building. I think that is something that we at GH2 are quite focused on, and we have seen firsthand experience we've had when dealing with policymakers from a lot of countries, what happens when they learn from each other. So definitely that's one thing. The next step is definitely deploying this license as a practical tool and not just a principle that stays on the SMAP website, but integrating into, as we discussed, permitting systems, finance criteria, and the major one, certification schemes like we have in our own green hydrogen standard. At the same time, it also means that you make the community engaged, more and more engaged, as Andrea mentioned, learn to listen, and also make the benefit sharing measurable so that they know. As you mentioned, Moni, like it's hard to explain to your grandmother what you do. It's the same way, really hard to explain them what's happening and what exactly it is when it comes down to the tangible reality of the communities who are affected. And definitely making the report become a reference for governments when they are signing new MOUs, for financiers when assessing risk, for new developers when planning projects. We at GH2 will definitely take it to the government that we work with, not least in Cairo, where we for convening this forum with a lot of MENA governments. And as I mentioned, like this comes at a very good time for in particular for the MENA countries with the water and the land contestation. So definitely there. Yeah, if we use it that way, social license will move from words to practice, from this website to actual delivery. And yeah, we just need to talk about more and more of how this can be the center of every project, not on the outlines. We need to make sure we talk about social license at the same time when we're talking about huge cost of capital. So yeah, definitely.
Thank you. Yes, I agree with Simran. This is so important that we move this up as much as cost of capital because we get lost there all the time. And I think there's two things that we can do. First of all, is continue communicating this. I think this is so crucial. And I'm going to throw us all on the bus and here and say that even in our H4D work streams, this is not the biggest work stream. This is not the biggest issue for everyone. And as such, I think we have a role, we're the ones that are in it, have a role in trying to make people understand just how important this is as a society, not even as an industry, just in general, that we should all be on board with this. So I think what we don't communicate doesn't matter. So we have to communicate it so that it matters, number one. And just number two, I was thinking just right now, maybe develop some sort of guideline. I don't want to say a checklist because evidently we've said that this all has to be very customized and we're all learning on how to do this. But maybe some extrapolate what we can from the case studies and develop some guidelines, just some broad issues. Look at here, remember in this part, these were some issues that appeared. Just something that it's actually a lot more actionable than just reading the cases. So maybe that's something that we can work on in the future.
Thank you, Constanza. And I agree with you. For my next step, it would be like get the communities to see these reports, but not only here is the report. So let's just get together and talk about this report and see the examples of social licensing that we have around the world. Because sometimes communities feel alone in this, and they're not the first community. This is not the first hydrogen project. We all have to learn together, and maybe getting them to see that in other parts of the world this is happening with the communities is a good first step. And I want to thank all of my panelists. This was a great conversation. And now I want to open the floor. We have some minutes. If someone from the audience wants to make a question, please raise your hands. I will continue saying that if you're developing a project, you can get this report, read it, and talk to your social people to see what you can implement in the different projects around the world. Any questions? Because I don't see any hand. You can follow up on us. Oh, Jose Zapata, please, the floor is yours.
Yeah, thank you, Monica. Great panel. Thank you, everybody. So my question is a little bit more tricky to put it somehow, and that is, how do we address the issue that some communities are simply saying no per se to projects, and I think many companies are very diligent in what they do, but there's a strong political social opposition per se to the projects. Period. How do you think we should address that reality? Because we need these projects. So how do you see that evolving?
Okay, who wants to jump first? Maybe Constanza
Well,
can tell us a little bit about what Chile is doing, or Juan David.
well, if you want, I can begin. Well, basically, see, well, at the end, as someone said in some of the questions of the answers, I don't remember if it was Andrea or Constanza. It's something that is not just about money, but also about all the things around the community itself. And why I begin with this? Because at the end, I think we have had a wrong approach when we think that when we, for example, in Colombia 2 years ago in a reform, we had some taxes that went up for companies developing renewable energy projects. Those that the money that that energy producers transferred to the local governments, that went from 1 to 6%, and everyone thought that with that everything would be like solved, and at the end today we keep having those struggles in those projects. So at the end, as I said before in my intervention about La Guajira, we think that this is something that is not just about how the communities are or think about if the project is good or not, if they are about if it's about having like like some retribution from the project or not, but it's a broader problem, because at the end you have that historical background and you need, and this is something that cannot be solved solely by the companies. You need the active action of the government here, because this is something that, for example, the basic necessities can be can be ever be supplied by a company. This is something that is a matter of the state. So at the end, we have, it's not just about if they agree or not. We think that it's something that has to be taken into account from the broad side of the problem, like that part, understanding that the communities have relatively valid also concerns about what will happen with them, why they don't agree with the project. But also it's important, as I say, to look from the broader side, from above, and understanding that this is not just about a single project, but it's a problem of the region itself, from the past, from the basic necessities unsatisfied. So that's the way we see that. But I understand your concern, and this is something that can just be addressed everyone in like a team. This is not a matter of a company. It's a matter of a government, of us also, from the association, from the local governments, from the communities. It's a conversation that we have to have.
Thank you, Juan. And
Andrea.
Andrea, before going to the closing remarks.
Yeah, thank you. I don't think there is an easy answer to that question. What I do think is that sometimes that reluctant no goes, as Juan was saying, from things in the past and some research we did on ammonia public perception, as I mentioned briefly, between comparing Mexico and the UK. I mentioned that trust was the specific element driving acceptance or not. However, it was not only trust, but also trust in the institution that was developing this project. So sometimes the hard no is because of lack of trust in the government where it's being developed, the industry, or maybe both. So in that case, I would recommend listening. Why is that a strong no? Maybe bringing a third party into, like, to play, an NGO, someone that the community trusts, and that usually, at least, of course, I haven't, I don't know the specifics of the project, but sometimes bringing a third party then helps with that trust and neutrality, and then believing that actually the benefits are going to happen. That would be a recommendation.
Thank you, Andrea, and thank you, Jose, for the question. Now we're gonna jump to Ignacio for the closing remarks. Ignacio, please introduce yourself and help us with the closing remarks. Thank you very much, everyone, for listening us in this panel.
Thank you, Moni, for this introduction. Well, I'm Ignacio Barreta Sartini, knowledge consultant from the bank, and I've been working on this report since the early beginning, alongside with Andrea, Constanza, Juan, Monica, and Simran, and of course, Caroline. So on behalf of the team, I would like to thank you all for being here today and for the contributions that you presented today for the report. And your insights and discussion brought real depth to the webinar and helped highlight the crucial role that clean hydrogen and renewable energy can play in fostering sustainable development. And we were delighted to see more than 55 participants connected, along with H4D partners and stakeholders in this session. So thank you for your time and for your collaboration along this topic and this deliverable today. And we would like to see you soon again. So thank you all, and we can close our session.
Thank you, Ignacio. Thank you to all of the panelists, and I hope we see each other soon again.
Thank you, everyone. Thanks, Moni.
Thank you.
Thank you, everyone. Thanks, Moni.
Thank you, everyone.
Bye.
Cheers.
Bye.